Hello and welcome to my cave. Thank you so much for coming to check out my channel. I really appreciate it. Today's project is another sort of short one. Last video I showed you how I came up with a design for some books for bookshelves, and I said that I would be happy to do a follow-up video and show how I actually made the bookshelves also. And when I posted some shots of it on the Tabletop Crafters Guild, there seemed to be a lot of interest. So in today's video I will show how I made that bookcase, this set of bookshelves right here. In fact, I'm going to show you how I made this bookcase. But to do that, I'm going to Tarantino this video, go back in time and show you what I did. Let's go over to the workbench. Now, one of the beautiful things about this project is it's another one that you can just get into your scrap bin, drawer, whatever you have, and use up these bits and pieces that you have around for this project. I like this. This is already pretty regularly shaped. It looked like I started something there, but then I changed my mind about my approach. I'm going to square this up really quickly. Just make a nice clean edge there. All right. Lots of people will have their own approach to doing a project like this. For me, some things should be built ahead of time and then painted. But for these kinds of little things, I prefer to cut up all my pieces, prep them, and paint them, and then just glue it all together, assemble the project. And that's what I'm going to do here. So I'll begin by cutting out all of the boards that I'm going to use for the bookcase. I'll begin with, and I don't have an exact here. I just have kind of a. Here's a bookcase I just finished. I posted the shot up to the Tabletop Crafters Guild. If you're not familiar with the Tabletop Crafters Guild, it's a Facebook page. It is an amazing place. There's close to 36,000 members. They're very supportive, they're very creative, and they are always sharing ideas and projects. It is a wonderful community. If you are a tabletop crafter, you should go check out the Tabletop Crafters Guild and join, because you get lots of great stuff. But as I was saying, I just posted shots of this bookcase that I finished. So you see here I have my sides, I have my back, top. I did these front boards. I didn't even finish painting all the parts necessarily. I left that raw. I'll probably paint that. I'll talk about this bottom too. This is just some, these are some heavy carpentry staples that I used just to give it some weight in the bottom, and it also makes it rather sturdy. It's a little more difficult to knock over as opposed to, say, this that isn't weighted on the bottom. It's very, very easy to tip. But I just kind of this time around decided I'd hot glue these staples in the bottom here, and it gives it a really nice weighted base. You can see I can really kind of shake it around quite a bit, and it stands up very securely. Anyhow, as I was saying, I'll get all these boards, I'll get all the individual boards cut out, the shelves, the sides, and then I will paint them, finish them, and then glue them all together. I'll show you that process now. So as I said, I begin with just some scrap. I'm going to go ahead and essentially recreate this one. So I've gone with a 3/4 inch width board for the side, and I've gone 3 1/4. So 3/4 by 3 1/4. Using my carpenter's angle here and my Proxxon hot wire table, and I'll cut out a slab that is 3/4 wide. Now I want to square this up, so I will use my square here again. Make sure it's flush across, and then just use my knife to square up the end here, just to make sure I have a pretty square end. I will then go ahead and go back in now, pull this close, and just slide that through just to get a nice clean squared bottom. There we go. Okay, now 3 1/4 long. Now the reason I chose those dimensions, you can do anything you want. I have smaller bookcases. This is pretty much the largest I've gone so far. You could go larger, of course. I've considered doing like a whole wall, like a library. But it doesn't matter. I wanted this bookcase. I always use a mini for scale, so I wanted this bookcase to be about that scale to the mini. You know, if this was a whole library, I might construct a little ladder system, as you see, for reaching higher shelves. But that is just what I went with for that. This doesn't have to be 3/4. This board doesn't have to be 3/4 wide and 3 1/4 inches long. It's whatever you want. It could make a low bookcase, could make it taller, could make it more shallow. That's just what I went with this, but absolutely your liberty with the dimensions of the bookcase you are constructing. So now I have this, I'll call it a slab, that is 3/4 wide, 3 1/4 long, and I'll cut some boards out of it. So, I mean, roughly an 1/8 inch thick, and just slice boards off of this. Eighth inch is really good on the thickness of these. So I've made some, planks here. 2 of these will be my sides for my bookcase. You see here I've got pretty much matched that perfectly there. There's my 2 sides. And that's going to be 2. I don't want my bookcase that wide, so I'll slice these down to the width I want. And I'll need 1 more for the topper, and then a couple of boards for the face. So I have my 2 sides, and I will set them aside over here. I want my shelves to be, let's go, I went 2.5 on there. We'll do that again. 2.5 wide. And I can cut all these shelves together at the same time. There, now I have a stack of 2.5 inch wide boards, and I also, if you'll notice, I recessed them a bit. So I'm going to take off about 1/8 of an inch off of the front of the shelves so that they set back from the case just a bit. So again, all the shelves on there together, take off about 1/8 of an inch. You could go about getting these whatever way. That was just what I did. It was easy to cut out all my boards at once and then trim down the ones that I want for my shelves. So now I have my, as you can see, I've recessed them. They're slightly more shallow than the sides of the case. Just creates a nice aesthetic there. And now I have created these 6 boards to build that up. So I have my sides, I have my shelves in the top and bottom. Now I'll go ahead and cut out these boards that I made for the faces. And those are, those are 3/8 roughly on this one. That was a feature I kind of thought of it last minute, so I didn't really plan it per se. I just kind of was like, oh, I think I'll do that feature. So these are actually different widths, but I'll even it up now, and I'll go with 3/8 wide on that. I got another piece of scrap here. Let's get it shaved down to, make sure I'm down to 1/8 thick, so that if it's the same width, so now this is 1/8 inch thick. So, and those shelves I cut back 1/8 of an inch so that these boards are attached to the bottom shelf and the top, and they sit flush in the cabinet, sit nicely flush right in there. Okay, now I'll cut them 3/8 wide. Okay, and then I need to make them 2.5 inches long. Same width as the shelf. Again, these face boards, the kick plate and the header here, or you could call that, molding, whatever, crown molding. But they also fit into that recess inside the sideboards, creating this nice cabinet shape here. So these are also 2.5 inches wide. Whatever your width of your shelves are, make sure your base and your header are the same width as well. So I will go 2.5 on those. Piece of cake. All right, and then I have my base board and my header boards. And then lastly, I'm going to need the back of the cabinet. This is a big piece. That is the full, that's about just shy of 2 3/4. I actually waited till I assembled. It's easier on this one to sort of wait until you assemble so that you make sure it's the right size, because it's an odd cut in the end. And I'm being a little more accurate this time. So I will wait on making the back of the cabinet for now. Next step is to begin to texture these with the old handy dandy wire brush. And I'm going to go in and create my wood grain. Best not to come in at a 90-degree angle for this. Definitely don't want to push through that way. I sort of put my thumb down to create some pressure. I lay it almost flat right down there on the, I'm going to lay it really quite low down on the board that I'm putting the wood grain texture into. And I'm going to press this in. Rather than raking it through and busting that up, I'm really just going to press this down into there and pull it across. And you can see that this wire brush is set up almost like in channels. There's a gap between. So that creates a gap in the texture. So I went across like this. Now I need to go back and hit the in-between so that the grain is there as well. And then the other end, just get that. Now you may, let's get the other side. You'll be able to see it better. All right. Pull it across. Pull it across. I'm not sure if you can see the pattern yet. You will definitely see it when I paint it and dry brush it, or rather put the wash on. But I've created the wood grain texture. Not sure if you can pick that up on the camera or not. But that's that. I'll even go in and hit the edges lightly. I don't want to pull this apart, but I'm going to hit the edges lightly, and I might get these little peel-offs, which these are nice actually. You get these little bits that peel off, and those end up creating areas where the wood is splintered and aged and kind of come apart a little bit. It's not intentional. I let it sort of happen by accident. I'm barely putting any texture. I'm just holding this and kind of raking it across all the edges to put some little bit of wood grain in those edges. All right, so I'll do all the boards like that. Okay, next is sanding. I have a very fine grit sandpaper here, and I am going to break all the edges. Again, this is a little finesse here. This is a supple touch. Better to go too light than to too heavy. I don't want to round everything. I just want to break the edges off so they're not sharp and clean. Look more like lumber. Voila. There we have all of our boards ready to go. All of our planks, our lumber for our bookcase, textured, sanded, and ready for base coat. I'm all about the base coat. I like to lay down parchment paper. Parchment paper is great for so many things. Parchment paper is just like a crafter's buddy. But I lay it down to paint. I mean, you can see my mat is messy. Paint gets through, stuff happens, whatever, you know. But, I mean, these aren't cheap, and I don't have tons of money. As I've said, I teach. I'm a teacher. And this already was more expensive than I really liked paying for it. So I want to keep it around as long as I can. Some warnings. I don't know if you can see this, but I dribbled a little acetone here. Then I'll show you what I use acetone for some projects, but I dribbled here and it immediately ate the print right off of the mat here. So don't get acetone on your mat. It eats it right away. But I lay down some parchment paper. I'm going to hold it down with my cutter. I use it for painting too. I'm going to begin with what I'm dubbing the BMC sauce. This is the black paint and Mod Podge. Once again, Jeremy over at Black Magic Craft. I could not even begin to express how grateful I am for his channel. He really has inspired me to see what I can do with this craft and try to realize my potential a little more. And this is the mix. I got the mix idea from him, black paint and Mod Podge. I don't have enough black paint in mine, but it works. That's all it is. Mod Podge until it's black as you like it. I'll probably add more black paint to mine here. And then a junky old brush. And I'm going to coat everything in this. All right, that's too much. And I don't want to go heavy on this stuff. A thin coat does the job because I don't want to lose. You might be able to see a little better my grain in there. You don't want to lose that wood grain you created. So this is a thin coat. Make sure you get my foam board that I'm using is kind of a, you know, it's kind of that blue-green. I'm officially going to call it green board, but it definitely has a blue leaning, sort of an aqua kind of a color. I don't want to see any of that showing through. I'm going to get messy because I'm going to go ahead and paint both sides. It's like a primer, so it makes everything dark for laying on my layers. I don't have to paint over many layers of paint. It works as it adds to the structural integrity. So it works to strengthen these pieces because of the Mod Podge. And yeah, again, not too thick. If you have any beads, especially check your edges. Make sure you don't have any beaded area where it's beaded up. And wherever you've gripped it too, go back over that before you set it aside. All right. Now I'll paint through all the rest of those. All right. Now that those are all dry, we can go ahead and put on our first coat of paint. For wood, I start off with the Craft Smart Golden Brown. I even labeled the bottle of wood so I don't forget. This isn't a light brush that I'm going to do with this color, but it also isn't a heavy, thick coat either. I'll load it up, but then I'm going to take some off and just test it and see where we're at. Because I don't want to fully lose... First of all, again, I don't want to lose that wood grain that's laid down there with filling it with paint. But I also don't necessarily mind that the black base coat shines through just a little bit. That's a pretty good coating. You can see it's not fully saturated with that brown, but it still kind of has some of the black showing through. All right, I'll finish painting these up and come back when it's dry. Okay, now that those are all dry, you can see here, you can already see how that wood grain that I created from the wire brush is really standing out. Something you don't see really until you start to put on the paint, and then it really begins to come out. So, but that's going to be even more so now that I'm getting into my dry brush. So for the dry brush on wood, I use this Craft Smart Suede. It is technically a tannish kind of color, but it really is almost gray, kind of a gray leaning off white. And this is my dry brush, and this is what's really going to age that wood. I want to make sure I have a very clean dry brush for my dry brush. I'm going to use some paper towel. And I will pick a good dry brush for this job. Doesn't have to be a nice one, just clean and dry. This is clean and dry. I mean, it's all stained and old, but it will work good. This is a good size for dry brushing pieces of this size. Okay. Load the brush up. Pretty good, not fully, but then I'm really going to get rid of most of that paint all the way down. Better to start off with too little than too much at first, as I said before. And get in there and begin to dry brush. So that was not quite enough paint, a little bit more. And dry brush these boards. See already, look at the difference there between those two. Dry brush, not dry brushed. This is really already looking much more like aged wood. Get both sides and the edges. Also really makes that grain stand out even more. Again, just dry brushing. I'm not really getting down in the grains, so they stand out a little darker against the rest. And there, that's once I've done my wash. I mean, that really is looking very good already. And I will continue working on that. If you feel like you got a little bit too much on, there's nothing wrong with going in there and just kind of rubbing it in with your thumb a bit. But I am very pleased with the amount of dry brush that's on that. Okay, I'll finish those and come back. All right. Now, after the dry brushing, you see this is the final look of the wood. Pretty good. I'd be happy with that already by itself, left alone. But I have one more step, and that's going to be my black wash. Now, first of all, you want these to be dry, bone dry. I have a little heat gun that I use to dry things. You can even leave them sit for a few hours or overnight, but you want these to be very dry, because as soon as you put that wash on, it'll wash away a lot of your detail if you're not careful. These are now very dry and ready for the wash, which I will do. This is a homemade wash, another recipe that I got from Jeremy at Black Magic Craft. This is his. He has a couple of videos where he has a wash recipe. The newer one, I mean, they're both a little older, but he released a second one that has a higher quality, slightly more expensive, but better quality for sure wash to make. I'm almost out. I need to make a new batch, but this is that wash. It's a good wash. I'm going to, again, always start off with too little just to make sure. Load a brush. I want my brush, good sized brush, and just lay it on there. Actually, that's just perfect. And this is really gonna what makes the grains stand out especially. And there you go. There's the black wash. You really see that grain came out very strongly in comparison. Now I've really got what looks like a good piece of aged wood. Very little goes a long way with the wash. Better to err on the side of caution for sure. If you've gone in and you've overdone it, then go back and dry brush again. You can always do that. I'll finish these up and be right back. All right, that's all dry now. As you can see, this is the final product. That's what it's going to look like. Looks pretty good. Looks like a piece of aged wood to me. And again, that's just foam board. But we've painted and black washed and all that stuff, so now we have all of our pieces here to assemble. Again, not the back yet, which I'll do after I get it all put together. But I'm going to begin with my sides. My two sides and my two, at least one of my headboard, the header at the top. And I'm using hot glue, and I'm just going to start gluing it all together. All right. I like hot glue. It's fast, it dries quickly, cools quickly, you know, whatever. Easy to clean up. Very user friendly. Again, I'm using this parchment paper here. The hot glue won't stick to it. Base at the bottom of the base plate. Other side. Right, so far so good. I'll start laying the shelves in now. So the top isn't actually a shelf, it's just going to sit at the bottom of the base plate, there, or the header rather, like so, and that will just be the top of the bookshelf. And it will begin to square things up. I think I'll actually go with a sturdier piece for that. Or maybe I'll start at the bottom. Same thing at the bottom. When I put the bottom shelf in, I'm not putting it all the way down. I'm putting it so it sits flush with the kickboard down, the baseboard. And it creates this negative space here, which when it's done, it'll sit underneath. So just put a quick little bead of glue around the edges. Move a little quickly, but not in a in a careful way. Make sure I feel it. Make sure everything's flush and put together. Put in the one on top. It's going to go in just like that. This is all fitting together very neatly because I made sure to cut everything to the correct tolerances, you know. We'll keep adding my shelves. I'm going to put in 3 shelves, just, you know, about equally distanced. Okay, so there's the basic units, shelves. Now what I need to do is make the back, and that really is what will make it really secure, really rigid. All right, so for the back, I'm literally just going to, I've created a nice 90-degree here. I will just lay my shelves directly on that piece of foam. So I have 2 edges already. All I need is the other 2 edges, which I can trace here. Voila, so that piece will be my back. All right, we're back over at the crafting bench with my procs on, and I will cut this piece out. I'll go back and make sure that this is correct. Okay. Obviously, I don't want my back to be that thick. So now I will go back in and it can be a little thicker than the 1/8 of an inch I've been using as my standard for everything else. In fact, I think I'll go 3/16 on that just because it's the back and it will be nice and rigid, making sure that I have a piece of that, as a piece has that clear coating, again for strength. Voila. And that will make the back of my cabinet. So same as I've done with all the other pieces so far. Everything's the same. Create the wood grain, the paint job, the whole thing. All right, as you can see, I have glued the back on now. I painted it and dry brushed and did my black wash and glued it down, and it's now very secure and sturdy. It's not as easily bent and flexible as it was. Very, very strong. There are all the shelves. There's the top. There's the bottom. Now what next I'll do, as I said, I weighted the bottom. Now again, the reason for this is one, weight. So it gives it some substance. This is very light and it really makes it much more sturdy and stand up better. So that's no big deal. I just happen to use what I have, and what I have are some of these hot dipped galvanized fence staples. They are just really heavy. That's a considerable amount of weight with those two staples there. So I'm just going to take something with a long lever. I got these channel locks here, and I'll bend these down so they fit in the bottom of my bookcase, like so. I've just bent them closed so they make two of those together make a nice weight. I'll go and hot glue those in. All right, I have hot glued those directly into the bottom of the shelves, like that. They're in there. They're not going anywhere. They'll never come out again. Well, they will if I pull them off, but they're hot glued in nicely, and it sits. It's weighted, keeps it from falling over too easily. I could even cover that now and clean it up, make it look nice, but it doesn't matter. It's just the bottom. That's how it sits. Yeah. Now I might also add, again in my example here, I added some little embellishments. I painted in, I actually used a border stamp, and I stamped on these little, what we might think of as being sort of painted decorative pieces here. I used it's a border stamp, it has a nice border on it. I stamped that on, and then I took some of my Craft Smart bronze and I just hit some highlights with it and did that. But as far as decoration goes, you can do whatever you like with yours, and there is the final product. Those are essentially the same, pretty close to the same size. I've already improved a bit on it, and you could put things in the top too, and have little bits. I have the Citadel skull box. Use the Citadel skulls. So these are really awesome. And put in this little bird skull here. I made this little, I don't know, a pot of some kind, or a vase, or a jar, or bottle, whatever. Put a little rune on it. And but you can do what you like decoratively. I've already shown how to make the books in the last video. If you didn't see that yet, go back and watch that. I do have books that I could put on this now if I wanted to, like so. And that's it. That's the whole bookcase. Thank you so much for coming and checking it out. I hope to see you again.